Yeah, it's hard. That's hard. So it's funny because like you don't really think like when you're younger that you're like this is what you want to do. But like I talked to kids that I went to high school with and college with, and they're like, I always knew that you were going to do this. You used to talk about it all the time. I always loved sports. My dad used to throw the football with me all the time growing up. Miami Dolphins were my team growing up in Fort Lauderdale, and I always loved football. And obviously down in Fort Lauderdale, you had the big three. You had FSU, Miami, and your Gators. Um, I lived in New York. I moved to New York after college. I lived there for 3 years, and I was there during September 11th, and realized during that time that news was not what I wanted to do. Also realized a lot during that time about myself personally. But I was working at God, where I had worked at CBS. I had worked at the early show for about 2 years with Bryant Gumbel and Jane Clayson at the time. And I had just left that position. And I wanted to go back to the studio where they were doing the NFL Today. They had the NFL Today was out of the same studio. I just wanted to go watch the Dolphins play one day. And so I reached out to like one of the stage managers that I knew. And I was like, hey, can I come by and just watch the game? I don't have money to go sit at a bar. And obviously it was blacked out in most of the areas that we had. And so I ended up going by the NFL Today, and I ended up like working that day. They were like, hey, do you know where we can find like paper clips? Do you know where we can find paper? Do you know where could you run these copies? And by the end of the day, the guy that had asked me to do all this stuff, he's like, do you want to come back next week? He's like, we can try to get you paid. And I was like, I'll come back next week. You don't even have to pay me. I'm sitting here watching football with Dan Marino, Jim Nance, Boomer Esiason, and Deion Sanders. You know what I'm saying? Like, I will come back every single week. I'll pay you to be here. And it was at that moment that I realized that sports had to be like the rest of my life. And I don't necessarily, I didn't actively seek to be on camera. This is something that truly